Welcome to the DJ the Money Coach Expert Interview Series. I'm Nick, and as always, I'm joined by the founder of the 7 Spheres of Money, DJ the Money Coach. How you doing today, DJ?
Oh man, I'm fired up, Nick. How you doing out there in New Jersey, my friend? I like that hat you got on.
Thank you. I'm officially a part of the team. It's official now. I have the hat. I'm doing great. Yeah, so why don't you briefly introduce yourself and then introduce our expert for today's conversation?
Oh, absolutely. So if you don't know me, my name is DJ the Money Coach, and my story is similar to yours, even though you don't realize it. So I came out of college with a 525 credit score. I had over $40,000 worth of consumable debt in addition to student loans. And I was shocked to get turned down for my first mortgage. Even though I had a professional income, I got turned down, Nick. Who would ever thunk it? And on top of that, I went and tried to get a small business loan, I think in the same year. Got turned down for that too. But unlike most people in our community, I didn't play the victim. You know, what I did was I said, you know what? There's got to be a reason why my credit score is 525. There's got to be a reason why I have $40,000 worth of consumable debt. And I'm trying to understand for the life of me why somebody would have given a 17-year-old to 20 years old $40,000 worth of credit card, spending capability, but they wouldn't give me a business loan. So that's one for you to think on. But regardless to that, I actually read a book. It was called The Road to Wealth. And I read one chapter in that book because that was the only thing I was concerned about was credit. And I found out how credit actually worked. And unbeknownst to me, having a minor in accounting and going to school to become a CPA, which I didn't, but I should have known about personal finances. But however, it's not taught in school. So I read that chapter. Within 12 months of reading that chapter, Nick, rose my credit score to 700. Within 24 months, I rose my credit score above 800. And that was over 15 years ago. And what I like to show the people in the audience is that my credit score has never been lower than 805 for the past 15 consecutive years. And the highest you can get is 850. But once you're in the 800s with no debt, you pretty much are free in America if you're financially independent. I'm not excited about that, Nick. You know what I'm excited about? In 2002, I was totally debt-free, owned everything with my name on it. 6 years after that, Nick, I became financially independent in America. I had a 6-figure income and I had a 7-figure net worth. And that was in 2008. Matter of fact, I met our guest in 2008 along that time. And I'm not even excited about that, Nick. You know what I'm excited about? I'm excited about talking to people that your age that have similar stories that I went out and made it my vocation. And I worked with in the past 20 years, 20,000 people, 20,000 people, schools, businesses, churches, non-for-profits, individuals, people that made $10 an hour to people that make $1 million a year. And I helped them become consumer debt free, Nick, and also helped them become financially independent over the past 2 decades. And that's what I'm excited about. And that's what this financial series interview with DJ the Money Coach is all about. And this person here actually met at this phenomenal conference called the E-Women Network, which just blew my mind when Dr. George Frazier told me about it, because he was actually mentoring the founder of the organization. And I actually happened to be there as a workshop speaker in a group. And that's when Michael Gerber was there as well. And then I ran across this sharp individual, and she was crispy sharp. I mean, just razor sharp, had securities license, had a financial background, had a financial service business, and a powerful sister in and of itself. And over the past 12 years, she's risen through the ranks and have become executives of chapters of the E-Women Network. She's founded, become an executive of the neighborhood housing system, which she's now currently the head of. She's actually run a lot of startups, and she's actually referred me to people that we've done cooperative economics. Can you imagine that? Cooperative economics inside our own community, where we actually fund people in business, do business together, and we don't compete against each other, because at the top of the mountain, there's no limit for people to get at the top of the mountain, because we're all eagles. So this individual, her name is Nikki Beasely, and she's powerful, she's sincere, she's got a servanthood heart, and she just inspired me when she breathed confidence in me when I was at that conference for the first time, and that gave me even more motivation to get better at my craft. So without further ado, I want to introduce my beloved friend and my, wings beneath my feet when I came out to E-Women Network, Nikki Beasely. Nikki, how you doing today?
Well, thank you. First of all, I didn't get the memo, but I know my hat is in the mail.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for that, and such a gracious introduction. I think it just validates you're not always sure who's watching, but if you show up authentically, people can truly see who you are. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to participate in today's conversation.
Oh, no doubt about it. It's definitely a privilege and a pleasure ours. And what we want to do, Nikki, we want to keep everything balanced, because I don't want people to think that all we do is talk to strong Black men. We talk to strong Black women as well. And that's one of the important things that I find out, is that we have to have that equilibrium in our community, because right now there's an assault on the Black family. There's assault on manhood. There's assault on Black women working against Black men. And that is the biggest, misnomer and the wrong narrative that is not the norm in our regular day lives, but that's what's been shown on social media. That's been shown in Hollywood, and it's just complete opposite. So I want to, thank you again. And what we normally do is a conversational interview, and just tell us a little bit about your backstory, even though I know I introduced you, but I couldn't do a just service to it because your resume is longer than my height at 5'6". So why don't you share with the audience from a woman's perspective, and being in the industry, in the financial industry first, before we get to where you are now, and what it took to get there as you started to rise up the ladder of success and significance.
Sure. Well, first, let me speak to what you mentioned, the power of partnership between Black men and Black women. I think that through these terms we're getting very comfortable with now, as far as systematic racism, institutionalized racism, us as a community realizing the disconnection between families and Black men and women was orchestrated. It was Absolutely. By design, not by mistake. So to be able to have platforms where we can heal from that and understand that this world is not designed to be by ourselves, and that we do have to be in strong partnership with, from my perspective, our Black men and vice versa. So, my story is, like you said, like many others. Out of high school, didn't quite know what I wanted to do. They had a career day. I decided I was going to go to the Fashion Institute of Design Merchandising. Didn't know much about it. Was going to be in retail management. Started working in retail stores. A branch manager of a bank at the time was shopping. She said, "You know what? I like the way you sell. Would you like a part-time job?" So I started my first part-time job at a bank. And she was a Black woman. And this is truly the example of when you see people like you doing the work, you start to model like, oh, I could do that. So she was, a mentor of mine. I wanted to be a branch manager. So I did quickly learn that I was more of a salesperson than operations. So I got quickly from behind the teller line. Like, why don't you work for St. Spots? You don't need to deal with the money. So anyway, did make some advancements with that first bank, and then moved on to another bank, and was not a branch manager at the time, but also had another strong Black male that was a mentor, who made it clear that if you wanted to be a branch manager, you needed to get your degree, because at that time I had just had my AA in an associate arts degree in retail management. So that's all I needed to know. Got my degree in business administration from University of Phoenix. And then I started branch management, had a long-term career with that bank over 20 years. And to your point, that's where I got my securities license, life insurance license. I have to say, during that time, didn't really understand the significance of what those things were, especially being a Black woman and having access to that industry. In 2005, maybe, I was just getting kind of restless. Like, I knew that there had to be more. I wanted to do more. So I started out my entrepreneur career as a founder of Be Wise Consultants. I wanted to go out and educate primarily Black women around finance, because what I was finding, it was very unbalanced as far as where the professional and expertise was coming from. It could be very intimidating, because usually it was a white male on the other side of the desk telling you how you should, manage your money. So I wanted to educate women about how to have those conversations. And this is the thing about entrepreneurship, as you can attest to. You get really linear focus and you have these, shields on your eyes. And right in the middle of the '08 crisis, I was living in the city of Stockton, which was one of the hardest hit areas of foreclosure. And although people loved me, they were trying to sell their home, trying to keep their home. So to pay my fee and to continue the work didn't happen. So I went back to the Bay Area. For those that don't know, I'm currently in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. Came from Stockton back to the Oakland Bay Area, started back in banking. And then I got restless again. In 2014, I had gotten to the point I had done all that I could do in my banking career. I had a number of different, management positions. But as banks do, they tended to start to restrict leadership, ability to make decisions. And as a branch manager, when you go into a bank, the expectation is you can do something. And when I got to a position I could no longer do anything, I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore. But the worst thing you can do to a leader is disempower them. So then in 2014, I was really open. I felt I had done all I could do in banking. I was really ready to be stretched and, be in an environment where I could continue to learn. And this is another, nugget about networking. An associate of mine had been, called by a board member saying, hey, we have this little nonprofit. We're trying to get it restarted. Do you know anyone that would have interest in the executive director role? And so she mentioned my name and I was open, because the other thing is I had a very traditional career as far as the traditional skill set. And during this time, it was all about IT, startup, and I didn't quite know how I would fit into that, culture. So I was excited. It was a housing organization, and I felt if I had to lead an organization, affordable housing in the Bay Area was a significant role to play. And I always tell the story. I didn't know much about housing, but in my banking career, I'd always been socially minded, nonprofit, driven. But I didn't know much about housing. And I adopted a portfolio of properties that were, in quite disrepair because the organization had been dormant for a number of years. And so, as I do network, making connections, found out where some money was. It was county money called the CDBG grant. I say it real easily now, but I always tease. I was calling it EFGP. I didn't know, but I was calling, the directors of those departments saying, hey, I know there's some money out there. We have these properties. Can you help me? I was consistent. And finally they said, you know what? It's clear you don't know what you're doing, but you have been so consistent. We have to help you. So through that, partnership, late 2016, 2017, our portfolio now, 16 units, are all being serviced by that CDBG grant, which is subsidy to help support disrepair and rehab to housing. And then also since then, we're getting ready to close on 17 units, converting non-affordable properties to affordable. So we've made some great strides, but all of that has been, leveraging what I said earlier was a traditional skill of network partnership. Shirley Chisholm is my hero when she says, if they don't have a chair for you, you bring your folding chair. My first couple of years, I was showing up everywhere that was related to housing, and people look like, where is she coming from? How did she find out about this meeting? Because from an affordable housing standpoint, and like many other industries, it's not well diverse, and you typically have white males making the decisions on behalf of the communities that we are serving as it relates to housing. So here I am at Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, close to 4 years. We have, a lot of successes that we've made in a short period of time, and, happy to be doing the work that I'm doing.
Man, that's phenomenal. I mean, you said a lot. I have to unpack some of those things because I'm thinking about being in the Bay Area. It's almost as if we become extinct as residents in the Bay Area. I used to live in the San Francisco area between 97 and 98. And it seemed like it was a lot more people that looked like us back then. But now with the escalation of the prices and the taxes, it's almost impossible for people to live there that look like us. That you got to make, probably $500,000 just to live average out there. So how do you manage that when you call affordable housing? And how does that work interdependently with HUD? I'd be interested to know how that all comes together.
So what my message is we have to be really clear of terms. Affordable housing means different things to different people, and we have to unpack or decode. Typically, when you say affordable housing, there's an assumption that you're talking about poor people of color, Black people. When you say missing middle workforce housing, meaning people are making decent incomes, that's typically white people. So what we have done a lot of work is uncoupling income and race to say not all Black people are poor, but just because they quote unquote are making good money does not put them at any better echelon than their peers, because as a Black person maybe making $80,000, $90,000 a household, maybe there's 2 family members, not a lot of money, but good money. If life were to happen to that Black family, they would be in just as much of housing crisis as that person at 60%, you know, and when I say AMI, it's area median income. So for the sake of this example, someone making $40,000 a year compared to someone making $80,000, a Black family making $80,000, if life were to happen, they get an eviction notice, there's unemployment, something happens, they're just as much at risk as that low income wage earner, because they don't have the generational wealth as their peers where they can call mom and dad. You know, they don't have those resources. So we've start uncoupling that, because we do have Black families making good money, but because they quote unquote make too much money, they don't tend to have a lot of the access. The other thing that we do is we started in 2017 something called Changing the Narrative of Home Ownership, to the point that you made earlier, that you don't need a 700 credit score. You don't need 20% down to get in a home. And we hold the banks accountable through their Community Reinvestment Act to make sure that these community lending programs are made available to people of color, and who we focus on Black home ownership, to let people understand you might have a 640 credit score, but you have affordability. We can get you into a home.
I mean, you know, that's important, because when we met, there were programs like the Nehemiah program, and I actually used to teach as a contractor for the credit unions to get people through that 8-week process to get the credit, get that 3% down. And then they discontinued the Nehemiah program, but they replaced it with a similar program that they don't tell us about. And what a lot of people don't know that look like us, when these banks come into their areas, they have these CRAs that they have to meet to actually stay and do business for a chartership. And the lack of education in that area is deliberate, like you said.
Yeah.
Because the other thing too that always cracks me up about, you know, the white people when they talk about these government programs is that, number one, there's this book that was written by Shapiro called The Hidden Cost of Being an African American. And it talks about case studies between whites, Blacks, and Hispanics, where, like you said, if we get a degree and we come out and get a job, we're the first ones and we're putting people on our back to cover them. But the white kid has got the parents, the grandparents, and they got this money, and they give them $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 to put down on a house, and they automatically are starting at second or third base, but then they haven't done as much work as the person that is their peer that looks like us normally. And then too, we don't understand that these programs are put together for us to get us a leveraging, position, because we built this country. And a lot of people don't realize is that our president, he's taking advantage of a lot of the HUD loans and stuff to get billions of dollars of loans that he's bankrupt on 2-3 times. But, they don't call that as a dilemma or a problem. But if we were to do one, we're negative, everything that they can think of under the sun. But how do we go out in your position and advocate, educate, and then get us in position that we can build up, that financial bridge that actually can get us even remotely close to that gap? And that gap is widening.
Yes. Well, what we've done, we're a HUD-approved counseling agency. So what that means is that we've been approved by HUD to provide the curriculum and education courses for first-time home buyers, and they receive an education certificate after completion, which allows them access to some of these subsidy programs to get into home ownership. But during these courses, they're an intense 8-hour course now because of COVID. We've put it on an online platform for now. It's over a course of 4 weeks, 2-hour sessions. But what we were finding, there was a lot of other financial information that people wanted to know more about, but since we had such a tight agenda, we weren't able to really do a deep dive in those conversations. So we started a Money Matters series where we're talking about wills and trusts, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about retirement planning, we're talking about all of these topics that typically our community doesn't get access to. And we've had, you know, a great showing. People show up. It tells us that people are hungry for information. And then the other part of it, outside of being a counseling agency, we also provide the counseling. So it's more about, it's not just about getting the information, but now how do you apply all that you are learning? And then also from the accountability to banks, I sit on a number of different coalitions. I sit on boards where we have bank meetings and we have some really transparent conversations about their data. And banks, for whatever the reason, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, they have had a hard time figuring out how to lend to people of color, Black people. But what we also do is crack the code. So here's what people may not know. And here's the audience, based on the audience. So typically, if you wanted to get a home loan and you went into a bank, you're right, they're supposed to have a community lending program. And typically, there's going to be a 3 to 3.5% down payment. Many banks are getting aggressive with creating their own subsidies and grants to help support their CRA numbers. But there is some income caps. Typically, you cannot exceed 120% AMI. If people have interest on that, you can simply Google's your friend. I can say this is one thing that we have now that we didn't have before is access to information. So anything that you want to know, you have to Google it. And at this time, there shouldn't be anything that you want to know that you can't find out. But anyway, go to Google, what is AMI, find what those amounts are in your area. But again, going to these people of color making good money, they may be denied by the bank. Say, sorry, you can't qualify for this community lending program because you exceed this AMI level. But this is how, what you're saying, how people getting moved out of the Bay Area, this is how it happens through gentrification. What they don't tell you is that you can make $1 million, but if you choose to buy in a census tract, we will give you the same accommodations as a first-time home buyer, where you only have to put 3.5% down. And what a census tract is for many of you, those that may or may not know, redlining, those areas that have been identified as disenfranchised, disinvested, not popular areas of communities, we will actually incentivize you to go into these areas, acquire ownership, and maybe that will help stimulate the area. So that's kind of a loophole for CRA because, again, we know many of us aren't making those high incomes, so we're going to assume if not us, who? White people are making those incomes. They're buying in these census tracts, so they're able to benefit for the programs that were designed for us.
That's amazing. So, I mean, I know that, and our people don't know that, but I always am taken aback when I hear it again. And that's similar to the urban improvement zone type of grants and stuff. And I always tell people, I'm not really a big proponent for voting, and I used to be, but I'm not now because since I've been in the banking business like yourself, I used to be a minority owner in a mortgage banking business when I met you for 3 years, and I would see these people show up at the auctions that don't live in our community. It would be Asians, it'd be whites, Mediterranean people, and their numbers are minimal, but they would just go up and snatch up lots of properties, REOs, and then they would make the impact by, gentrifying the area and raising the taxes where they will push us out. So with that said, how do we get this information to the layman person that needs to have it, and how soon? Because you're at the forefront, you're pioneering this, but not many people know about the NHS. I mean, I didn't know about it until like 7 years ago because they have one in our community. And like you, somebody reached out to me and asked me would I be interested in an executive position. I just went down, checked out, see what it was about. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But the bad thing about it for me, it was in the Latin community. It wasn't in the Black community. And I'm like, man, how's that benefit? I'm gonna come work for you and help the Latin people get ahead. I got nothing against them, but first and foremost, I'm not a racist, but race first. So I'm gonna take my talent my treasure and my time, and I'm invested in me and my people first and everybody else second, because that's survival at the end of the day. That's the law of the jungle. And I don't understand why our people don't get it with what's going on right now. So how do we bridge that gap, Nikki? And how do we get our people to put down their pride and start rolling up their sleeves and getting aggressive about going to take advantage of these programs?
Well, the good news about COVID, since we've now gone to an online platform, anyone can join the conversation. So they can visit us at our website, richmondnhs.org. We have our event calendar, Money Matters series. If there's an interest in ownership, they can come in and get the information and get their certificate, but the certificate is good for the state of California, but it is just good to understand, and you can't hear the information enough. They can also email me at nikki@eastbaynhs.org to put them on our distribution list. But we are advocates of getting the information out there, because you can't perform on what you don't know. So we're just trying to close the gap so that you do have the information to make wise choices and to know what you're saying yes to and to know what you're saying no to, and not allowing people to make assumptions based on the information that they're hearing that, oh, I can't buy a house because you said I needed this. Because through our Changing the Narrative program, Changing the Narrative and our Lender Ready program, since 2017, we've gotten over 100 new homeowners in the immediate Bay Area, because we're like, if you want a home, we're going to figure it out. You mentioned credit, which I just want to speak on, which we also have to understand. Low credit score does not mean poor.
Right.
It simply means you may not be established because you don't have enough credit cards or stimulation of activities to raise that. So banks do have alternative lending programs, which means that if you're looking to be a homeowner and you are below that minimum credit score, usually 620, 640, banks have alternative credit programs where now they can look at your utility bills to demonstrate your ability to pay, your lease payments. So there are other ways. So again, and of course I'm focused on ownership because that's what we do, but then we also know that's a gateway to wealth creation and closing the gap. So if people out there have interest in home ownership, know that there are many ways to get into a home, and it's not just what's on that fact sheet of what the bank is providing you to say what the minimum requirements are.
Okay, yeah. So with that said, with what's going on right now, which is a seminal moment in time again, I mean, it's almost like the Rodney King scenario, but it's worse because people actually being killed. But now you have this white guilt, and unfortunately, the appropriation has already started happening where these companies are not legitimately concerned about what's happening, but they want to make money off of it. And, they want to get tax write-offs, which I try to let people know. So when these grants and everything, they're available for this limited time and pertaining to home ownership, how do we as Black people, first and foremost, take advantage? Because with the PPP, 60% of, Black people didn't even apply, which was just this foolishness. Now, conversely, you're out there in the Bay Area, PayPal is right up the road from you. They had $520 million worth of grants available, and they had a window from June 1st to June 30th. They got so many people that didn't look like us that applied. They suspended the applications a week before the deadline. And me as a PayPal business account holder for 12 years, that pissed me off because I know probably 5% of those grant applications were from Black people, but I can bet you that probably 50% of the people that use PayPal on a consumer basis look just like you and me. And this is my pet peeve. I get so sick and tired of us being the person or people that are being abused, but then everybody else come under this, this divisive category of diversity and POC. I ain't down for that. I'm just gonna be real with you. And since I'm free, I'm gonna speak peace to power, because you cannot sit up here and watch anybody get executed, get brutalized, and then roll out these programs and give them to everybody else. Right. How do we stop that ignorance and take control of the initiative and take ownership and equity in this one-time opportunity in our lifetime and not play the victim role?
I knew I liked you when I met you those many years ago. I'm so glad you asked. I say the first thing is we gotta hold our Black-led organizations accountable, because there is a responsibility we have to make sure that the community we serve gets access to the information. So many communities have African American chambers, they have NAACP chapters, they have urban leagues, all of these organizations that were birthed out of the original civil rights movement. And while we're still having the same conversations that we were having 55, 60, 400 years ago with these organizations in place, is concerning. So for individuals out there, one, Google where your chapters are, and if you don't see them actively and aggressively trying to outreach, hold them accountable and ask them why, because they get funds to do exactly that. Now, if you were successful in getting the PPP or these grants, we have to take accountability as the consumer. This is not the time to go be buying planes, trains, and automobiles. It is money to either enhance your business, go buy some other property, leverage this as an opportunity to get that step up. Because what we don't want to have happen when the 8-week period and the accountability of, do you owe this money back or will this be a grant, and you can't validate how you spent that money, we don't need another strike to say, see, we tried to give them the money, but look what they did with it. So next time chaos happens, we won't do this again, because you know how they participated 30 years ago. So I think there's an accountability on both ends, but if there is an individual seeking direction of where to find it, and I don't want to, be cavalier, but Google, and I'm not, because I'm not sure where people are in this conversation, but it is a good starting point. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, so with that said, so let's backtrack and let's talk about financial literacy, because that's how we initially met. And let's talk to this young, junior in high school, that freshman in college, and that young lady, that young man that they want to get off to a great start, and they don't want to become victim of this $1 trillion student loan debt scandal and scam that's been pervasive throughout our community. And I sit down with people on a regular basis, have doctorate degrees, doctors, lawyers, and I'm amazed that when they're in their 40s, they still have $150,000, $200,000 worth of student loan debt. When I paid off my student loan in 2002, I'm thinking that was it, and I can live into my 40s and 50s. But I literally know people right now in their 50s still paying student loans, and I just can't fathom being in debt at that age for a piece of paper that you didn't change 3 or 4 different careers. So, Nikki, talk to that young person. And I've got, my son, he's got a scholarship to the University of Texas Engineering School. It's an 80% scholarship. And he got 4 other full rides: Texas A&M full ride, University of Houston full ride, University of Chicago full ride. I told him, hey man, it's a business. But he's deciding to go to UT Engineering School at 16, and he needs $6,000. I say, hey, that's on you, because I'm not going to finance no debt that ain't going to make you money and give you no transformation, no skills, when you got 4 other full rides, no expenses. And he's in a conundrum now, because with COVID-19, they're telling him that everything's online. I said, well, what's your
doesn't really matter then.
Right.
There you go.
Exactly. It's his dorm fee, 9-month lease, that's the $6,000. I said, you know what? I'm not taking on that debt. You know what you should do? Stay at home. So talk to those people who are told, get as many loans that you can because it'll pay back, when you and I know that's not the truth.
So in any data point measurement for an African American, we fall way below. Housing, health, employment, you name it, we are fractions of percentages amongst our peers. But the one area that we outpace everyone is education. The ones that get the most degrees. But with that education comes debt. Why? That person, Black person making $100,000 a year sounds good with money, but if they got $150,000 worth of student loan debt and paying $3,000 to $5,000 a month, that totally destroys any ability to build wealth. So I think as a community, we were told, and our generations before us was told, get your education. But no one educated us on the type of education to get.
Right.
So the first thing is, whatever education you're pursuing, making sure that at the end of that education, you're going to be able to make the income to help offset the debt. We were working with a woman looking to buy a home. She had more student loan debt than she was making in income.
Wow.
So you have $150,000 worth of student loan debt, but you're only making $80,000 a year. So if you're going to go into that type of debt, there should be some guarantees. You're going to be making 200, 300, 500. And if you can't make that math work, then there needs to be another discussion. And I am not at all saying that education is not important, but some of the areas that these young people may be wanting to go down may not require the traditional education path. It may be a certificate program. It may be an AA program. Because what I recently have seen in legislation is that they're starting to dismantle degree requirements when a degree really is not significant to.
Right, right.
And as a hiring person, as an executive, I'm not necessarily looking at your degrees, per se, based on the roles that I'm looking to hire. So as a young person, and many of us, and even when I was growing up, I started out in retail. Now look at me now. I would encourage, if you're not like dreaming about it, sleeping it, breathing it, then I would probably maybe start off at a junior college just to get your feet wet, because oftentimes people will transition their major a couple of times through their, college life. Two, if they are needing grants because they weren't successful, and if they're needing grants because they weren't successful in scholarships, and if college is really your desire, if you're a sophomore, junior in high school, then that's your job to make sure you're doing everything you can from a GPA, athletic place, so your education is free. But if that's not the case and you do need to get in debt, then you will need, and maybe with some guidance. So you as a money coach, I'd be happy to talk to them, and the network that I'm sure you've developed is to say, okay, it's going to cost you $80,000 to get this education, and you want to be a philosopher. Don't know, and you want to get a philosophy degree. Don't know if that's the right degree. And, just kind of manage it like that. Because we do know that there is some debt that's good debt, assuming you get the right type of debt.
Right, right. So let me restate it. I am not against education by any stretch of the imagination. I'm against miseducation that doesn't give you skills to make money right now. Matter of fact, now all the largest Silicon Valley companies, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, they're hiring straight for skills now. You don't have to have a college degree. If you can code, you can do digital marketing, you got a job. They give you an aptitude test, just that simple. So again, we're behind. That digital divide. And how do we get our children to stop with this social media? I gotta keep up with the Joneses and all these celebrities. One thing I'm glad about the COVID-19 is just eliminate all that nonsense and all that white noise. Yeah. So you can get down to the heart of the matter, what's really important. And what's so funny, Nikki? Right now, in the past 10 years, there's more savings than we ever had in the past 20 years because of COVID-19. Isn't that amazing?
Because we're not driving, we're not going out to lunch, we're not buying coffee, we're not doing all of that. You bring up a good point, because I'm dealing with this with my youngest daughter, who's decided to get in IT, cybersecurity, not an industry that I'm, familiar with.
That's a huge career. That's a burgeoning career.
And she did her research, found the community college that she wanted to go to, but through a friend of mine, his son has been an independent IT guy for the last 8 years, and he said, yeah, she don't need to go to college, just need to get these certificates.
Yep.
So as what we learned or was taught, doing informational interviews. So if you do have an interest,
Google certificates.
And to your point, then utilizing our networks are, these diversity officers with all these companies. They're all on LinkedIn. Hi, I'm interested in working with you in Google. I understand you're the diversity officer, needing to make sure that there is equity and diversity within the company. I'm an African-American male or female who's really interested in this field would love to see how I can get attached to ABC company. But the other thing is through informational interviews, talking to people who've done that work to see if they can assist you down that path, because it can still get you there. But to your point, we are so many steps behind, we need to get there faster. And if we don't ask the questions, we don't know.
You're right. And you know the thing I find out in our, income bracket in our circles, it's almost like they don't want to tell you because they don't want you to get to the level that they're at. And fortunately for us, you and I, just like your daughter, I took my son to my friend's house, and his daughter's 31 years of age. She graduated from Stanford, no debt, just bought her first house. She's at an executive level. And I took my son over to her house to meet her because she's an engineer, got him hooked up with Nesby and started putting this. I said, this is unapologetic because your dad and your mom put the work in. So that's our job, to kick down these doors, because that's what everybody else does. But unfortunately, it seems like across the landscape, these gatekeepers, they seem like, hey, I made it, you figure it out. But that's not the way it's supposed to go. So how do we put an end to that, especially right now? I mean, me personally, I'm calling every executive, say, hey, they need financial education everywhere. And now they're looking for people that look like us, that's qualified. Give me an opportunity to get to know.
Well, I have to say, I have classified myself as a savvy disruptor. I think our generation, you and I, have to be okay in having the hard conversations to say this is unacceptable. And when we're in meetings and things don't sound right, like, nah, that ain't right. Because again, the moment is now. We have not had the amount of attention, and now everybody's talking the same language, talking the same dialogue. Like I said, systematic racism is starting to roll off of everyone's.
Right. It's the hot topic that everybody don't want to be the first person on, but they don't want to be the last person on the boat. So
we're all now speaking the same language, and to your gatekeepers, and many of those gatekeepers are Black folks.
Well, yeah, that's my point.
So we calling them like, hey, come on now, that ain't right. We just, because we can talk to each other and our peers in a way that others cannot. Because I've seen it too, where you get to an echelon or position, but yet you don't want to rock the boat, or whatever your reasoning is behind it. But we then have to have that conversation, or we have to bring that young person with us and sit them in the chair in front of them and say, you are going to have to deal with this individual.
Wow.
Because if not us, who? Nobody's going to care about our babies more than we do.
And they shouldn't.
And if we're in position to do something about it, then we have to. And we can't lay it on the responsibilities of others if we are in position to make that difference.
Right. So I got two things I take from that. When did that change? Because when I was growing up, that was what the civil rights was about. That was what affirmative action was about, that our people made it a point to get us a job, get us connected. I mean, I remember my aunt she retired as a sergeant from the police department in Chicago, and they had this program called Explorers, where you would come, they would take you to these events, get you part-time jobs in the summer, and they made it a point, even if you want a job, they force you to show up to go figure out what some other opportunities are for you, because they were standing in the gap. When did that change, and why did it change that now we don't do it? And then why aren't you afraid to get that pushback? Because I get the pushback all the time when I hold my brothers accountable in my inner circle and say, hey man, you have a responsibility to find somebody qualified that looks like us first and foremost. And if you don't, most of the time I'm like, hey man, I don't even want to talk to you. I can't even call you my friend.
Yeah. So this is where I coined a phrase for myself last year called mosaic conversations. Meaning, have you ever had that situation, the idea of throwing a ball against a window, like, oh shoot, what did I do? You kind of peek, like, I hope I didn't break it. Those kind of hard conversations. But then I had to say, you know what? Mosaic art is beautiful. So we got to be okay if we crack some glass. But with that being said, I think I'm going to say something that's going to be very unpopular.
Okay, bring it on.
Going back to Black-led long-term organizations. I think there it's become, and churches, because I'm putting it out there, and churches, there's become this egotistical platform that's been created, and it stops being about the people in the service and it becomes more about them.
The personality.
The personality, because now you have some clout, now you have some influence, and now you are riding that wave and you've forgotten how you got there. And I'm going to also say, and I think you mentioned it earlier in conversation, we as Black people have a hard time saying when we need help, which then means many of our organizations are not sound operationally run. We don't hire to our weaknesses or to our strengths because we're afraid, to your point, somebody might come in and look smarter than me, be better than me, and let me just kind of, you know, be always at the top, and not knowing in leadership, you always hire to your weakness.
Right.
It's okay to be exposed because that's how you move forward. It's less you got to do. But you know, that's how we got here, I believe. But where we sit right now, I think that there is a consciousness that some people have and some people don't. Prior to, I think, the end of August, they're doing a March on Washington, recreating the anniversary of the March on Washington that Martin Luther King did.
Okay.
Prior to hearing that, I had a core group of Black-led organizations that I thought was, because I'm ready to get my, you know, my little beret and my black leather jacket. Because the
yeah, that's right. You're in that Panther neighborhood.
You know, because the frustration level, if not now, when?
Right.
But anyway, I went to this closely knit network and said, we should do a march. Crickets.
Wow.
Because people don't want to get uncomfortable. Because they're not, to some degree, I understand it.
Right.
If we are a Black person in America who has demonstrated some form of success, it was hard.
Oh, heck yeah.
So once we get there, by that time, we tired. So it becomes self-preservation versus for all. And I understand the human side of it all, but if we're taking these roles and putting ourselves in position to be that person, then we can't afford to be tired.
Right.
It's not for us.
Right.
And when I took on this position, I was clear. I'm on the sunset of my career. I'm ready to create legacy.
Right.
I want to leave something behind that says I was a part of making something happen. Not just that, you know, I was able to have the prestige, the title, but what did I bring to this work? And that was one of the most disappointing misnomers I had. I thought everybody was in it. I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Everybody's in here to do the good work. No, they're not. No, they're not. So I don't think that there's going to be a mass change, but for those that get it, are responsible to do something. Because not everybody gets it, but those of us that are required to do something.
Man, you know, and I know, I don't want to take up all of your time, but you said a couple of things, and I remember back in 2007 to 2009, I was working with Title I schools with the single parents and the grandparents of the, you know, single Black boys specifically. We had a program we were working, and at the time I only had one child, and now I have 4, and I'm out there, I'm putting that work in. I'm putting my money behind these people, and they're ungrateful. And then after, you know, 2-3 years of doing it and spending several $1,000s, and more importantly, my time, I just look back like you said, I said, you know what, later for that, I'm gonna work on my family, and we'll make sure they're straight, and hopefully they'll go out and do great things. And I did that for the last 13 years. And then all of a sudden I have this calling again, but I know when you get on this position that the work is unthankful, you know, and it's thankless.
I'm going to reframe that for you, the way that I would choose to hear it. It's not that though the folks that you're serving and, you know, low income, single family, you know, whatever, that we have, being in the finance as long as you have, I'm sure you can understand this. This is financial DNA. What's now being talked about is the trauma of our ancestors through slavery shows up in us now. So many of those individuals did not get the education. No one was sitting across the table reading the Wall Street Journal, talking about stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Within the property, I had an aha moment. In a property that we're about to acquire, people got multiple cars. I'm like, what's up with all these cars? You know what's up with all these cars? This was a symbolism that we had something. So there is some unrooting that we need to get to before we can even get to this conversation. There's the behavior of money. It's because I've worked with people who make $30,000 a year and have 10 properties. I've worked with people who have $150,000 a year and still renting.
Right.
It's the mentality, and you only know what you've seen. So if you had a parent that was irresponsible about money, two things are going to happen. Either you're going to be irresponsible or you're going to be scared to do anything with money.
Right, so you're not going to do anything.
Yeah, or you're not going to do anything. So I think we really have to get to the root cause. And sometimes we start up here thinking that that stuff is a solid foundation, but it's not. We got to understand the foundation, meet people where they are before we can start having those conversations. And the other thing is hope. Because again, you may do a great workshop, but if they don't have the ability to implement it, they get frustrated. They decide, well, yeah, that's too much. Or now they have to go into an environment that's so unsupportive of all the great things that they've learned. And if we're dealing with young people, they have no influence over their household. So if the parent's not sitting right alongside them, it doesn't matter how educated they get in finances, because they're not in control of the pocketbook or the influence of the things that are going to happen. So I think I end with this. We have to remember, we didn't just show up like this. This was created.
Right.
We ain't crazy. Like this we just not crazy. We're just not lazy. We're none of those things. But the system has dictated that's how we show up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I want to encapsulate this over the next 90 seconds. And what we always do, we always get Nick's feedback, because when we're doing these expert interview series, we want to get what he gets from it, because Nick's only 29. He's an educator. He's one of my heroes because he's actually teaching in the Newark high school system as a Black male, and he doesn't have to, but he's doing his time. So Nick, I want to hear your take back of what you've learned over this awesome conversation with my good friend Nikki, and then we're gonna, wrap it up and put a bow on it.
Right. Well, this was indeed an awesome conversation, and just starting with the discussion about the organizations. I think it's the prestige, the egos, the mosaic conversations, the obsession with symbolic victories and change rather than tangible change is what drives myself and others away from those traditional organizations. And I would rather join a team like the Seven Spheres of Money, where I can implement those principles and start to make those changes individually, and then go back and teach those principles to others. I think a major theme that came up in this conversation is education. And I'm speaking on education from various perspectives. Of course, education in the traditional sense of being strategic about how we go about college. Also being educated on our condition, how we got where we are collectively, and how we can use that information to maneuver. And then also being educated on learning about these resources, especially with housing, because Nikki, that's your area of expertise. And I think we need to do this again, because Nikki, you do hold a leadership position, and we need to have a follow-up conversation about that topic of leadership, so you can speak on what you've learned and what information you can share based on your experience as a leader. But thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for all of the gems that you've given us during this conversation.
Oh man,
I appreciate the open invitation, and thank you so much. This was truly a joy.
Man, that's amazing. So Nikki, so what I would ask you to do is tell me what you're excited about, because I have a saying that I share with my children, I share with my members, is Veni Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. I got to use my Latin education that my mother forced me to take 8 years of and make it impactful. So what are you excited about? Because we're victorious in everything we do. It's a seminal moment, like you said. And what do we look forward to at the end of 2020 and 2021 from your perspective as a Black woman, as a Black leader, and especially in the housing, segment of what you do for our people to aspire to? Because I'm excited.
My first thought is I don't know if I can say I'm excited because of something getting ready to happen, but what I can say is I'm excited about the momentum and opportunity that if we can get on one page and move as a force, we will be the generation that helps catapult this conversation forward. So the generations in front of us will have a platform that they can excel.
Oh man, that is awesome. And give us your contact information again, Nikki, how we can get in touch with you. We're going to put this information in the links as Nick will edit this awesome conversation, and would love to be able to get you to come out and have a part 2 of this conversation, because one, you just made me realize that how important wealth is for that first family of ownership in the housing segment alone. Forget about building businesses, but the 80% of Black wealth is derived through ownership of homes. And like you said, and I think, so how can we get in touch with you? And, I think that's
Sure.
about all we need to know.
So Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services is our organization. Our website is richmondnhs.org. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to contact me directly, my email is nikki@eastbaynhs.org.
Any upcoming events that you guys are going to have in your area in Richmond or the Bay Area? Because we do have members out in Richmond and also in San Francisco that I know personally that may be interested in information of most upcoming event that you have that you want to promote as well.
Yes, so since we've moved our pre-purchase workshop to a Zoom platform, we've already started in July, but for those that have interest in home ownership, starting in August, every Thursday in August, we will have our pre-purchase workshop. You get an education certificate that gives you access to money. July 22nd, don't hold me to it, but if that is a Wednesday, we are doing a Money Matters series on credit. We work with an organization called HERA, which is a nonprofit that assists and it's attorneys that help with major disputes related to credit. But I would say just keep our website close. All the great information is there. Oh, and in October and November, we do our annual Changing the Narrative event, where it's a big, statement about changing the narrative of home ownership and making sure our community knows that if home ownership is a dream of theirs, that it can come true.
Man, awesome, awesome. Well, Nick, you know how we end this. I always end this the same way every time, Nikki. I always wish people to have a pom-pom lifestyle. That's plenty of money, peace of mind. I hope that everybody can come join us on the Beaches of the World Club, because everybody deserves to have that life, and it is not impossible because it's always possible. And you said one thing that was very important: the power of our network. Our network is a direct correlation to our net worth, and we got to hold them accountable to kick down them doors for generations to come. Nikki, I appreciate you taking time out to invest with us. These nuggets that you dropped, everybody that's watching this, like this video, share this video, and get the word out, and we'll put all the information and links. I'm DJ the Money Coach. I wish you the best, and this is it. Peace.
Peace.